G'day. Anyone from Australia? No? Yeah, good on you. Tori here. Hi, that's my student. Today I'm presenting on the female profile of high-functioning autism, and I changed the title from the female profile of autism to female profile of high-functioning autism, simply because really our sample is a high-functioning sample, not a completely general sample, although we can't entirely be sure. But anyway, we'll get into it. First thing to note is Victoria Miller is my student, and she undertook that. That's her in the back down there, trying to hide now that I'm pointing her out. Am I going too fast? I tend to go yak, 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 yak very fast. Yeah, slow down. Right, really slow. Broad Australian accent, hard to grasp, I know. Sorry. If I'm getting too fast, tell me to slow down. Dr. Janine Mangiviana, just there, is also one of the individuals who was involved in this research. Tony Atwood as well. Tony's not here, unless he sort of snuck in. Did Tony sneak in? No, right, okay. And I'm Mark Stokes. Right. Beg pardon? Yeah. Now, today we're talking about why clinicians and parents and can I get a show of hands, clinicians? Yeah? Clinicians? Right. And the rest of you are researchers, parents and the like, yeah? Right, okay. Lorna Wing initially proposed back in the early 80s a hypothesis that girls might not be being seen largely because the diagnostic criteria are focused toward boys. And when you think about it, that's pretty obvious. So females are rendered apparently unaffected and therefore hard to detect, and therefore really what's probably happening is that they're being subtly affected, and clinicians who are overworked tend not to see them. Now, previous studies have found a whole bunch of stuff. And there's not been a lot of previous studies. In fact, one of the things that shocked me when I first moved into this area was how little work had actually been done on the presentation of females with autism. But what has been found was that the differences include that girls are better than boys when we look at age-appropriate interests or appropriate play and imaginative play. So girls do more age-appropriate interests, they have more imaginative and appropriate kinds of play. Nothing different than has already been presented this morning. Boys are better at girls, it tends to seem in the literature when we look at, for instance, their intelligence levels. Boys tend to have higher levels of intelligence. Boys have been found to have more functional communication, although those results this morning showing that girls have better communication skills accepting language was interesting. Boys tend to have fewer social, attention and cognitive problems in general. And a lack of difference has been found on the actual profile of the IQ, the autism quotient by Baron Cohen, and the ADIR, CARS and ADOS. Now, I don't want to get into all of those other studies because they've either found something or they haven't, and I think that the reasons will become apparent in future years as to why some of those didn't find differences and why some of those did. What we did was we started asking clinicians, the people who are actually seeing cases, what it is that you're seeing. So we sent a questionnaire out to about 1,000 Australian clinicians, paediatricians, psychologists, psychiatrists, anyone who's seeing these kids, based on DSM-4 criteria, and we required that they had frequently seen both girls and boys and made diagnoses. 61 of those returned those questionnaires. We factor analysed those responses. We got 9 domains of data, or 9 domains of results, and we developed 99 questions on those 9 domains. We put those 99 questions up on an internet study, and we had the participants were parents of children and adolescents aged 5 to 18 years of age. They came from Australia, UK, the United States and the Republic of Ireland, simply because we kept it in an English questionnaire. This was a doctoral thesis, Tori's doctoral thesis, so there was no money behind this, so we couldn't have it interpreted or anything like that, so we had to go to English speakers only. We got 283 male ASD cases and 82 female ASD cases and 30 female typically developing cases. I'm not going to talk about the 27 typically developing male cases today, because what we're going to do is we're going to compare HFA, or rather ASD males to females and ASD females to typically developing females. And the results were analysed using a technique called group invariance confirmatory factor analysis. And I'm going to just show you what that is because that's a little bit technical, and I tend to sort of gloss over these things because I'm one of those math stats people. and so that this stuff's sort of my second nature, so I'll explain a bit what we're going to be doing. Factor analysis is a technique where we look at the underlying relationships between variables, and you can extract a number of factors, such as we have here, factor 1 and factor 2, extracted from these variables. And what you can say is that this factor structure for group 1 is the same as that factor structure there for group 2. So that could be, in this instance, girls compared to boys. But equally, you can go and you can have not just similar factor structures, but the loadings on the weights between the variables and the factors, and the residuals or the error terms can also be the same. And that's called an equivalent structure factor weights error values model. And that is fully tau equivalent. And that means that the two groups are exactly the same. Right. Now, why do we do it this way instead of just looking at means? Well, the problem with means is this. If we look at the pink line there, you can see the pink line is quite different from that blue line. Very obvious. Anyone can see that those two lines are very different. However, if we look at the mean of the pink line, it's 3.93, and the mean of the blue line, 4.66. Now, I tricked this data up. This is fake data. I made this just to make this point. That's the advantage of being a statistician. You can do this kind of stuff. That's a complete little fabrication to show you the fallacy of a t-test. That pink line is very different from the blue line. The t-test says they're the same. If I t-tested that data, I'd be standing up here saying, and t says these two data points are exactly the same. This is exactly the problem of trying to differentiate girls from boys with ASD. They look the same when you look at them in rounded off, simplified mean variables. You look at an IQ and go, oh, this IQ is the same as that IQ. They look the same. When you look at the subtle differences between them, and the subtle differences here, you find differences. And the only way you can do that is with a sophisticated analysis like a factor analysis. Now, I'm going to be reporting on only 3 of the 9 domains that we looked at, and we found some other fascinating results. You're going to have to get it in the literature when we publish, and Tori will be publishing very soon. So we looked at, and I'm presenting here today, behaviour, communication, and presentation, because they're the 3 sort of broad domains that clinicians see when a case turns up. And I'm not going to go on all these little numbers there, because all these little numbers, I'll show you the figures. Much easier to read figures. What we have here is a plot of loadings. Now, right throughout the presentation, the white dots will always be typically developing females, the black dots will always be ASD boys, and the yellow dots, our points of interest, will be the ASD girls. What we have are the loadings here for oppositionality, and we have the loadings over there for quietness. And notice the most striking difference here is that, or the most striking thing here, is that ASD boys and girls very, very typically similar to each other for oppositionality. But when we look at quietness, we find isolation from the family starts to separate ASD boys from ASD girls. Now, don't be confused by the lack of difference in the size of the scores there, because this is a domain from loading from -1 to +1. And because we've got all of those there, the differences appear subtle, but they're actually quite large. When we looked at attention, we found that ASD girls, strikingly, had really good attention. They had much lower defiance scores than even typically developing girls. They had much lower disruptive scores than typically developing girls. And they showed much less poor concentration. Now think about it. That's going to be a girl in a classroom who's going to be a good girl. She's going to be well behaved. A teacher's going to sit there and say, oh, no, she's good. No problems here. You're not going to suspect an ASD diagnosis. Someone says ASD, the teacher's going to go, no problems. Mum and Dad are going to go, no problems. She's quiet. She sits in a room. She plays with her dolls. She likes her horses. Those are, by the way, some of the things we tended to find in Tori's study. The obsessions that they have, horses, dolls, and a few other things. But you'll have to read that when it comes out in the literature. Right. Now, here's where it starts to get a bit interesting from my perspective. What we have here, this is an XY plot of oppositionality against quietness there. And we can see the 4 domains that we got for behaviour. See, oppositionality and engagement. Now you look at the white line there, you can see that slope there, the yellow line and the black line. Black lines, remember, ASD boys, white lines, typically developing girls, yellow lines, the thing we're interested in, We look to see, where does the yellow line fall? Is it closest to the black line or the white line? And you can see through all of these, through most of these behaviour things, the white and the yellow and the black lines are close. It's the behavioural presentation of ASD boys and ASD girls are very similar. However, there are some subtle differences that we saw in the factor loadings. When we analysed this, we found that ASD females relatively fit the ASD male model. So they're very similar to each other. ASD males relatively fit the ASD female model. What we did was we actually got a model of the female data and we fit the boys to it to see how well they fit it together. And we had a model of the male data and we see how well the girls fit. So we can see that they relatively fit each other. They appear very similar to each other. Then we looked, ASD females relatively fit the typically developing female model, but typically developing females did not fit the ASD model. And that's what the blue circle there is illustrating, is that typically developing females have a broader array of behaviours available to them than do ASD girls. But ASD girls and ASD boys have similar levels of variance in each other, but they overlap each other, and there's a little bit of overlap with the ASD girls.